जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Dear Lord, please guide us all so that we can learn from the characters in the sacred texts how to learn the message that you give there and apply it in our lives. Hare Krishna. So I am grateful to be here with all of you today. And just a question: is this being streamed on YouTube or on Facebook?
Prabhu is live stream on Facebook and also it's on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Also on Zoom. Thank you.
So today we are discussing about the conclusion here of this discussion, very important discussion between Maharaj Rahuguna and Jada Bharat. And it's interesting to see what is the impact of that discussion on the characters here. So one of the differences between when the Bhagavatam gives us a discussion is that we can see what the recipient, the hearer, also says. So I generally use the framework. I mentioned this in Sunday class that Chit will look at the context, we'll look at the implication, context of what is being said in the verse, the implication of what it means, and then we'll look at some takeaways. So here, let's look at the context. That the Bhagavatam is essentially a book of conversations, and the mega conversation is between Suta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya, Shaunaka and other rishis. Within that, the central conversation is between Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And now within that conversation, we have multiple further conversations. And one such conversation is what is happening right now. It is between Parikshit, here between, it's in the 5th canto. It's a relatively short conversation, but still it's a significant conversation. Here it is between Jad Bharat and the king Rahuguna. Now, when he's speaking, most of the times it's Jad Bharat who is speaking. Now, quite often when you look at these conversations, the setting of the conversation is quite interesting. Now, if you see these two conversations, if you look at the settings, these you could say are traditional settings where in a forest with a sage on a high asan and the speaker on a high asan. It's forest, but it is traditional. That means traditional means the way there's no vyasasan, literally in the modern sense of the asan, but there is an asan on which the speaker is seated on a higher level and the hearer is on a lower level, and they are all assembled properly and they're discussing. Now, if you consider this setting is definitely unconventional. Unconventional in what sense? That the hierarchy is dramatically reversed. Initially, Jad Bharat is the palanquin carrier, and Rahuguna is sitting relaxed in the palanquin carrier, in the palanquin itself. And then Rahuguna realizes and he offers his obeisances and humbles himself. When Jad Bharat speaks some astonishing words of wisdom, Rahugana realizes this is enlightened soul. So the start of the conversation in that sense, it's not a planned conversation. In fact, Jad Bharat has, for most of his life, acted like a Jada person. That's why the name Jada. He's actually like a dumb and deaf person, and suddenly that dumb and deaf person is seen to be very wise. Now it's interesting in the English language. mm, Dumb is also used for foolish. Mm. Now it's pure peculiar because we could say dumb means somebody who can't speak. Mm. But we use the word dumb, or people, TV has dumbed people down today, or something is spoken in a complicated way. Say, how can you dumb it down? So if you consider, blind is not seen as a sign of less intelligent, or you can't, or deaf is not seen as a sign of less intelligence. It's dumb. It's a dumb person. So the idea is that whether a person is wise or not is revealed through through their speech. And somebody who may consider to be dumb. So Jad Bharat was considered to be dumb. When he speaks, he's revealed to be profoundly wise. So the conversational journey, if we consider, in this conversation, what happens? At the start itself, Jad Bharat, he is thought of as dumb, but he turns out to be very wise. And now we consider Rahugada. Rahugada is pious, but from pious, he becomes spiritual. Mm. So it's interesting that now, although he's going in a royal palanquin, it's not that he is going to going for some sense gratificatory purpose. He's actually going to hear Bhagavad Katha, but for hear some kind of katha, so hear from some sages. But that is more of a hearing at a pious level. So from that pious, so this is more of a ritual hearing. Yeah, it's something. It's a part of a culture. We should do it. That pious hearing is often it's a pious form of entertainment. You know, there are lots of spiritual hearing uses enlightenment. Pious entertainment, it's Bhagavatam can give us both. Bhagavad Katha, or in general, we hear the Ramayana, we hear the Mahabharata. We can get both. As the Bhagavatam still start of the 10th canto says that, that this is Manoranjan, but it is also Atmaranjan. Bhavoshida Chotra Manobhiramat. So it can be entertainment, which is not bad. But from there is enlightenment. So this is the journey that Rahugada has gone on. And now, if you consider what is the difference between piety and bhakti, piety is punya, and bhakti is, as the way Prabhupada presented it, it is a serious and total dedication to spiritual life. So, what is the main difference between these two things? If we are to consider, one of the things we could say, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, bro, we can
Yeah.
hear.
So now, in that context, if we look at what is the first statement that Maharaj Raghugana is making. See, normally, if we hear a class, and then we might say, "Oh, that is a great talk." Or you see, this when we say it's a conversation, it's more like a podcast than a conventional class. Now, a podcast is different from an interview. An interview is where generally the question it's much more scripted, where the questions are given this question, this question, this question, and this answer, this answer, this answer. So the person also gets to prepare. In podcast, it's much more natural, free flowing, spontaneous. There might be some parameters. I don't want to talk about this topic. Let's not get into this controversy. That's okay. But overall, it's much more unstructured. So the conversation is more like a podcast than an interview. And generally, now when the person who's asking questions gets answers, at that time, what does that person focus on? So it's almost like the end of the podcast. And generally, at the end of a class, at the end of a discussion, we say, "Thank you very much. This was a very enlightening discussion." Mm. Now, the Bhagavatam in general does not spend a lot of time on pleasantries. Of course, those pleasantries may have happened, but the Bhagavatam does not get into describing those. So, the thing that he speaks, the first sentence that Rahugana speaks over here, that is about the value of human life. So, it's interesting that if we look back at the teachings of Jad Bharat, he's talking about the journey through material world. Let's look back at the Bhagavatam now. If we go back to the fifth canto, a quick overview of this. So we are right now going on in this discussion. So this discussion, the supreme character of Bharat, Jad Bharat, is where his narration starts. And then after that, things move onward. And as they move onward, what happens? This whole discussion, the ninth chapter, it will go on till the 15th chapter, where a discussion between Jad Bharat, sorry, it goes on till the 14th chapter. 15th chapter is the next thing that happens. So if we consider this is an ongoing discussion, and based on what Jad Bharat has spoken, when he's going to respond, Maharaja Uguna, the thing he focuses on is human life and the importance of the human form. Now, why would he pick up this particular point? Now, one way to do that is we can retrace back in this particular conversation and see in which verse exactly the human form is talked about. And that's one way we could do it. Okay, like sometimes, if a speaker gives a class, it happens with me. And I give a class and I ask people, what point did you like? And then sometimes what the audience speak is, I think, did I even speak this point in the class? Okay, then sometimes I have to ask, okay, when did I speak this point? So what happens sometimes? It's not that the audience is picking up something completely different, but rather I might have spoken one side point, but that triggers something in the audience. And when that triggers, okay, yeah, okay, when did I speak this one? Oh, you spoke this and this is what I remember. Oh, okay, okay. That is a connection. So generally, when we are hearing a talk, there is both a objective and a subjective side. Objective is what was spoken. Subjective is what was registered. So after every class, different people, before each person. So if there's a speaker over here, there's a speaker, and the speaker objectively may speak, say, 5 points or 10 points, whatever. As the objective, we could make a list of points spoken. But among the audience, each person may find some point important among those. Now, which point registers? That is subjective. Now, it is also possible that with some people no points register. It is just that, oh, this is boring. I don't know why I tuned for this class. Mm. But there is this objective and subjective. And suppose one person says, okay, this is the point that registered for me. This is the point that I found important. Now, that point which they found important tells also about what they are going through in their life. So, what we consider important in a class also reveals what is going on inside us. So, in English, there's a saying, what we speak about speaks about us. What we speak about speaks about us. So, as soon as we meet someone and the person first thing asks, Okay, how is that devotee? How is that person doing right now? So what we speak of, that means, this person is, we are meeting somebody after 2 3 years, and the first thing they ask is, how is that devotee doing? That means that person is really concerned about that devotee. If somebody asks, okay, how is the new temple project going on? How is the funds coming for that? That's what is important for them. So what we speak about speaks about us. So the subjects we speak about give us a glimpse in our heart, glimpse of our heart. So from that perspective, in the context, what is happening? Rahugana is taking the human form of life as the key point over here. So let's move to the second part now, in the chit implication. So ever since I started traveling abroad, I started in 2014, and I have been almost spending 6 months to 9 months outside India, and trying to not. Most of my program happened for Indians because we have only mostly Indians in our temples. But I've been thinking about how to reach non-Indians, and here Auckland is a great example of both Indians and non-Indians working together. So I have been observing how other religious groups share their message and what they emphasize, what they de-emphasize, what is distinctive in the message that we offer. So sometimes Prabhupada said that once he was asked, why are you here? We already have, he was asked, I think, in Africa, South Africa, somewhere, why are you here? Now we already have Christianity. So Prabhupada said, but you have forgotten what Jesus has taught. So then is your message the same as Jesus? Prabhupada said, yes. Also teaching you to develop love of God. So in one sense, if we consider our message, there is something in that message is universal. So for example, be kind, be truthful, worship God. So if we consider 10 commandments that are there in the Old Testament, they're often ascribed to Christianity, but they come from Judaism. Christianity also accepts them. But we could say those are something which are universal. Many of those are universal. Love God, love your neighbor, don't commit adultery, don't steal, things like that. Of course, now there's something like don't worship graven images. That has to be carefully understood. But there are some things which are universal. And there are some things which we can say are specific or distinctive. Hmm. Distinctive. So the opposite of universal is specific or distinctive. Distinctive means that is what our tradition offers. So now, by our tradition, we could mean many things. We could mean what the Vedic tradition offers as compared to general theistic religions across the world. We could say what Vaishnavism offers as contrasted with the broad Vedic tradition. We could talk about what Gaudiya Vaishnavism offers as contrasted with other Vaishnavisms. So this universal to distinctive can vary. We can have general religion versus Vedic. Vedic refers to the broad Vedic path. Theism and Vedic. That could be one way of looking at it. Then we could look at within the broad Vedic tradition, what does Vaishnavism offer? What is the Vaishnav teaching specifically? Or we could go specifically, or even more specifically, we could go that within the Vaishnav tradition, we have the Vaishnav tradition. What does the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition offer? Now, what should we be teaching? Should we be teaching what is Vedic? Should we be teaching what is Vaishnav? Should be teaching what is Gaudiya Vaishnav? So if you see the way Prabhupada presented it, the Gita is a broad Vedic book. Almost everyone across the Vedic tradition and outside also across the Vedic tradition, almost everyone accepts the authority of the Gita. And beyond also, it's widely respected. The Bhagavatam is a Vaishnava book, largely speaking. It's widely respected, which is why only those who worship Shiva or Shakti, they won't quote from the Bhagavatam so much. The Bhagavatam is a Vaishnava book. and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that is a Gaudiya Vaishnava book. These three are the books on which Prabhupada spent the maximum time on sharing, on commenting. If we go in the other way also, my point is that when we emphasize within ISKCON itself, there are some devotees who are saying, when we teach, should we be teaching a general Vedic message? Should we be teaching a Vaishnava message? Should we be teaching a Gaudiya Vaishnava message? Well, it depends. There is no absolute principle over here. If we consider you're not the body or the soul, which is such an important teaching of Srila Prabhupada, that's not a Gaudiya Vaishnava message. In fact, there's practically no verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita which say that you're not the body or the soul, directly speaking, because that's a self-evident truth in the Vedic tradition. So this is that, okay, the Chaitanya Charitamrita focus is much more not that you are the body or the soul, but the soul is the servant of God, and the soul is not meant to merge with God, but is meant to love and serve God. So now why am I talking about this implication? That I was saying that in this particular context, in the Vedic to Vaishnava, in the theism to Vedic, one of the distinctive teachings we have is about the human form of life. No other religion talks about human form the way we talk. To some extent, Buddhism, let's leave it apart, but Buddhism has become more a lifestyle for mindfulness and peace than more of a spiritual quest right now. But if you consider in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, the human form is not emphasized. Why? Because in their idea, only humans have a soul that can be reclaimed. So Jesus comes to save the humans, and other animals and other whole of rest of life is basically just a background, like a backdrop or a background for the drama of human salvation by Jesus, human redemption by Jesus. So that the human form is special and the human form is distinct from other forms, that is understood. But their idea is humans versus animals. So in Christianity, the idea is there's a difference of category. Category means, what is the difference between the two? There is a categorical difference in the sense that only humans have souls. And now some Christians say that animals have spirits but not souls. And they try to differentiate between spirits and souls. That's probably one of the reasons why Prabhupada uses sometimes combined words, spirit, soul. So the category is that only humans have souls. So that is the categorical differences there between Christianity. So only humans have souls. Now, if you go to the other extreme, is there is no difference. No difference except biological sophistication. That is the view of science. No difference except there is biological sophistication. That means what? That we are just evolved from animals. This is the view of science. And according to them, no one has any soul. The whole idea of soul is a myth completely. So it's just that the degree of biological arrangement of the wiring of the brain. So a lot of self-help books now take evolution as a given, and they say that actually the difference is basically that humans have better developed brains and animals don't have. And they say, okay, a particular part of our brain is the amphibian brain, a particular part of our brain is the reptilian brain, like that. They try to analyze So now, actually, Christians have a far bigger problem with evolution because their idea is that there's a special act of creation when God created humans and invested souls. If humans have come from animals, then when did the soul come in? If an ape evolved into a human being and an ape does not have a soul, a human has a soul, how did that happen? So Prabhupada focused on the idea of spiritual evolution. So our understanding is, Vedic understanding is, the degree of consciousness is different. The degree of consciousness development is different. And what does this mean? When you say the degree of consciousness development is different, Prabhupada would say it's not just our that the and what Darwinists or evolutionists say is that just our brain is more sophisticated. Now we agree, brain is more sophisticated, but the brain is more sophisticated because the consciousness is more evolved. So it's like somebody is smiling. Okay, they're smiling. Sometimes you can have a secretary smile, which is kind of rituals kind of smile. You smile, but then if you're smiling, that could just be an act of the face, but it could also be that you're happy and that's why you're smiling. So the soul's consciousness is more evolved, and for that more evolved consciousness, the brain needs to be appropriately developed. So the idea is that human form is different because the consciousness is more developed. So now, why am I talking about all this? This may seem a little because it's scientific or philosophical detour, but I'm talking about all this because it's related with how Maharaj Rahugana jumps on this particular point. There's a whole the forest of material enjoyment is being talked about, suffering of the living entity is talked about, but then the human form is the lesson that Rahugana jumps on. Why is that? Because only when his consciousness is developed means what? That we can in human life, as humans, everybody needs means for living. Means for living is animals need food, we need food. Animals need to reproduce, we need to reproduce. So, food, clothing, shelter, whatever you want to say, the means for living is something which all living beings, humans and animals, they all seek. But the meaning of living is the one thing that we humans alone can seek. What is the meaning of life? The means for living is how to live. How do I get my next meal? How do I make sure that I'm secure when the weather goes cold? These are questions which all living beings ask. But why to live? That is a different question. Now, when somebody lives piously, also, Prabhupada sometimes differentiates that. Prabhupada uses the word religion to translate dharma. Dharmo hitesham adhiko vishesho, dharmena hinaha pashubhi samanaha. That dharma is what differentiates. Now, the word dharma has many different meanings. One of them, of course, is religion, and Prabhupada uses religion, uh, that translation. But then Prabhupada also tells that dharma, it is not religion. Talks about in the Bhagavad Gita introduction that dharma is the essential nature. But dharma has many different meanings. So now, currently, there's a lot of debate about whether AI can be religious. So, if you consider from that perspective, actually, AI is able to do a lot of good, enormous work. There are churches in Europe which have replaced priests with AI. You ask AI to give a talk, give a 20-minute sermon on, say, on the Ecclesia 7.17 or whatever. And it gives a good talk. In fact, there was a recent one prominent atheist. He presented his conversation with ChatGPT about does God exist? And AI came up with very good arguments about for the existence of God. So, is the existence of God a belief or a fact? And then they went on reasoning, and they said it's a fact. By this definition of fact, it's a fact, and God exists. So it was quite remarkable. So we may say, can AI also do? AI also do? Uh, can AI be religious? If you can, I have recently written a book called Prayers Inspired by Bhagavad Gita, and one devotee told me he was inspired by that, and he asked AI. He said, "Okay, take this Bhagavad Gita verse and compose a prayer based on that." And he put about 5-10 of my prayers that I had composed as samples, and he told AI compose a prayer. And AI actually composed quite a good prayer. So he told him that, can we consider that AI is religious now? So I told him that there is the difference between the craft, the art, and the heart. So AI is very good at the craft. Now, art, maybe sometimes AI can phrase things very beautifully. Sometimes it just makes a complete mess of things. With heart, it is zero. AI is not having any emotion, any bhav when it is composing things. So the idea is that dharma can also be a means for living. What do I mean? Dharma can be means for living? That many people may practice religion because that is a means of livelihood for them, or that is a means for enhancing livelihood for them. So ahar, nidra, bhai, maithun, if we consider, the majority of people do karma kanda, which is piety, for the sake of better ahar, nidra, bhai, maithun. So that means what? I was in Varanasi and I was driving for a program, and I saw a Hanuman temple, a small street side Hanuman temple. And on top of the Hanuman temple, somebody had written, Tum to ho bal brahmachari, mujhe de do ek nari. You are a celibate, you are a monk, so please give me a woman. Now, I don't know whether it was a joke or it was a serious prayer, but it was written over there. And see, dharma, in the sense of religion, can also be used for pursuing ahara nidra bhai maithunam. The famous prayer in Christianity, "O Father, thou art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Give us our daily bread." That's a very direct prayer for bread. Now, there are some Christians who may interpret bread to have non-literal meaning. And they say actually bread means this and this and this and this, and that's okay. But the literal meaning is bread. So dharma actually refers to the meaning of life. What makes life meaningful? What makes life worth living? That is a question only human beings can ask. And when do we look for the meaning of life? Generally, so why does Maharaj Raghunatha start talking about the human form of life right in the beginning? Here, because he is focusing on the theme that uh, I have got a human form of life and I have spent it in piety. I have not done anything truly spiritual with it. So piety means what? That, say, sometimes it happens. Uh, somebody wants a good partner, a good life partner. Now, if they're a bit cultured, this is happening in Christianity, Hinduism also, it happens everywhere, not just. I was talking with a Christian pastor in America, and he said the fastest recruitment program for them is the singles program. Singles program is where basically they have programs where unmarried men and unmarried women come together. They come for programs and then they can date among each other also. And people are looking for life, people are looking for partners. And their idea is, if I come to a church, probably I'll find a person who is of a decent character. Now, how much that is true, that varies. But the point is, somebody can come to a church or a temple looking for a life partner. That's not a bad thing. We need a partner. And if somebody has a pious partner, that's good. They're not coming for God over there. So religion can also be done for pious purposes. It's not necessarily for a spiritual purpose. So Rahuguna's trajectory is that he is moving from piety to spirituality. And within that, the key point is recognizing that the human form of life is special. The human form of life is rare. Human form of life is extraordinary. So the way I have talked about the human form of life today and its importance is different from the way the human form of life is talked about in the Bhagavatam in this particular context. It says that this is something which is desired even by the Devtas. And so whenever we want to make a point, importance of a point is to be conveyed. There are two ways to do it. Prabhupada talks about it. Use in his Life Comes from Life and few other places. He says you can do it based on scripture and you can do it based on logic. So, and he says that, especially when he's talking to scientific audiences, he says there's no, don't bring scripture in, just present using logic. So now each of these serves a particular audience. So if we are speaking largely to a devotee audience who already have faith in scripture, then when we are going to give importance of a point, okay, this point is said here, but there's this shloka for this also, there's that shloka for that also, there's that shloka for that also. And so many shlokas are there for this point. Oh, this is a very important point. That's one way of looking at it. And most of our classes, we do it that way. But then what happens? We don't become equipped by this to present that point to people who do not accept the authority of scripture. So most people today, if you talk about this human form of life, what is the difference between humans and animals? They will either say there's no difference, or they'll give some variety of answer. Most people will not accept that religion is what differentiates between humans and animals. There are many cases of you can train a monkey to do a puja. Most people will not do that, but a monkey can do a puja. There are so many cases of animals also doing religious activities. Now there's an explanation for that. Our understanding is that if animal seems to be religious, like in South India, there's a big sensation about a crocodile which would eat only vegetarian food. It lived in a temple lake and would eat only the rice that was offered to the deities. So our explanation for that is that's the soul in the crocodile's body was previously in a human body, and for some reason has fallen. So the like Bharat Maharaj fell to a deer body. So he was a deer, but he was not an ordinary deer. He was searching around, not just wandering around where I would get the best grass. He would stay near the sages' homes and he would focus on the getting whatever grass was there. He would focus on hearing spiritual sound vibration from the sages. So we have an explanation for that. So if you just say that religion is the difference between humans and animals, most people, if you use the word religion in the sense of certain religious rituals and certain beliefs, that people will not, it will not click to them. But it's almost widely agreed that it is we humans who ask about what is the meaning of life. Now, of course, we can say philosophy and religion are means by which we find the meaning of life and we make our life meaningful. But this search for meaning, what is life meant for? It is what differentiates us humans from animals. We have got a more developed brain, not so that we can come up with more and more creative ways for finding an attractive partner or making more tasty food or those things. Those things are, they may functionally required, but that's not the purpose of this highly developed consciousness and the highly developed intelligence that we get. So what I was doing today was presenting this point from the perspective of logic. And the takeaway which I'll conclude here is that what do we understand over here? Let's see, we all are pursuing life in a particular way. And when do we ask the question about the meaning of life? That is when our current meaning is revealed or exposed to be either the futility of it is futile. Okay, I will achieve money, I'll get fame, I'll get respect in society. One day I'll die and I'll carry nothing with it. Either the current meaning is exposed to be futile completely, or at least its inadequacy. This is not sufficient. Life has to have some more meaning. So for Brahuguna, through the whole speech that Bharat Maharaj has given about how much misery is there in the material world, how the life is temporary over here, through it all, what has happened is Brahuguna has realized, my God, the way I was living is meaningful. So the internal way of saying how human form is so glorious is that even the devatas aspire for the human form. The human form comes after 8.4 million species. So this is an internal means scriptural way of glorifying. And now somebody who doesn't accept first, if somebody starts asking, how do you say there are 8.4 million species? Biology says there's a different number of species. So even the devatas aspire for human form. Who believes in the devatas also? That's just a pre-scientific mythological imagination. So we should be equipped to explain the key points of our message based on scripture and based on logic without needing to refer to scripture. So that will make us versatile. And with respect to this particular point of meaning, we can inquire where some experience where our current structure of meaning is demolished or at least damaged, and that makes us think of something more. Oh, life is meant for taking care of your family. Yeah, that's one meaning of life, but is that the ultimate meaning of life? Is like, oh, life is meant to kuch kar dikhana hai. Life means to show the world what a special person I am. Okay, that's okay. But after some time, most of the people whom we want to show things to, they are going to die, and we are going to die. Is there something more to life? That is where one actually turns towards Krishna. And that asking that what is the true meaning of life? What will make our life meaningful? That question only human beings can ask. And that's why emphasis on the human form is there in this particular verse. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. Mm, our broad topic was on the significance of human form. I talked about from three different perspectives. So I talked about human form from the context. We discussed how the Bhagavatam is a conversation, but conversation more in the form of a podcast rather than a normal interview. Now within that, the carry home point. So when Jad Bharat and Rahugana speak, for Rahugana's carry home point is the human form. That's the first thing he speaks after hearing everything that Jad Bharat has spoken. So why is it? So we can go back and trace in this verse Jad Bharat talked about the human form. But we can say that this is, I talked about how when a speaker is speaking, there is the objective and the subjective. Because what the speaker spoke, the point that he spoke are the objective. But which points register for a particular audience? That could be different points, different audience may find different objects. That depends on the subject, that's subjective. So subjectively for him, Rahuguna, his journey is from piety to spirituality. And we discussed how there's a difference between piety and spirituality. That was the implication part. So here I discussed about the point of human form, how human animal difference. I talked about this from three different perspectives. Human animal difference, according so according to Christianity, there is we alone have souls. Soul is the difference between humans and animals. In science, or especially evolutionary science specifically, so the mainstream science today, there is only biology is the difference. Uh, we are biological machines, but our biology is more sophisticated. Whereas in our Vedic understanding, we discuss how this is the degree of development of consciousness. That is the key difference. And based on that difference, other things fall in place. Because the consciousness is more developed, so that's why we also have correspondingly a brain that is more developed. Just like for a small 3-year-old child, we'll give a very simple game. For a 10-year-old child, we'll give a more sophisticated game. So, like that, the body is much more developed. So, I also discuss how when we're teaching scripture, We can look at what is universal in the teachings of our tradition and what is specific, distinctive in our tradition. So in our tradition, the human form and the emphasis on the human form is distinctive. There's the distinct Vedic emphasis. And then if we say this is the difference is dharma. So what does dharma mean? If we say dharma means religion, then we can have animals also doing some kind of religious activities. We can have AI giving a sermon. So of course these have explanations. Dharma actually means another way of understanding the meaning of life, as contrasted with the means of living. So ahar, nidra, bhai, maithun, they're the means for living. We all need to do this. We all need food. We all have biological drive to reproduce. We try to defend ourselves and we need to rest. These are just means that all animals, but humans alone can look for the meaning of life. And what makes my life meaningful? And the takeaway for us was that two takeaways, that when we explain, we should be able to explain based on scripture, but we should also be able to explain based on logic. For insiders, we can explain based on scripture. For outsiders, when we try to explain based on scripture, there are so many assumptions in our explanation that they may not accept the assumptions. It becomes like a one assumption piling upon another. So today we took the approach of explaining based on logic. And then, as far as the meaning is concerned, we can look at when will we look for meaning in life? When our current meaning, either it turns out to be inadequate, there has to be more to life, something more has to be there. Or it just seems to be futile. This is not just I want something more in life. What I have is totally valueless. There has to be something more in life. So either way, when we pursue like this, we can move towards a more meaningful life. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? By the way, I was drawing things and you were able to see that, na? Throughout the class.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Very
Yes,
nice.
very nice class.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, or we can stop here?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your lesson. It was very interesting because just yesterday I've seen that one of this, scientific talks about the meaning of life, and it was so unwrapped, so nicely presented how the evolution of human seeking for the meaning of life, like when you first think that it's wealth, control everything, and so on, and then how come it brings you to the that point of when you have everything, when you have all the money, all the control, you just your future turns into past because you control everything. But what was interesting that talk ended up that the meaning of life is I don't know. And I thought, oh my God, how blessed and how lucky we are that we know the better way of concluding our way of looking for the meaning of life. And I was thinking that actually is what you said, that the human form is looking for the meaning of life. But if this human form is misguided and it has no better knowledge than just senses gratification, that it's an endpoint. And that thank you so much. It just made a perfect understanding of what I've seen yesterday and what we've talked today. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Happy to be of service. Yeah, actually, more and more people in today's world are also thinking about meaning in life. And especially, there's an increasing post-material culture. This is not a spiritual culture, but a post-material culture. This is very much there among young people, where many young people are not just looking for making money, they're looking for making a difference. And some people may take environmental activism. Some people may take up the cause of racial justice or ending gender discrimination. So everybody is trying to find a lot of not everybody, a lot of people are trying to find some meaning in life by looking beyond the normal way of living. Normal way of living could be, okay, you get a job, settle down, have a family, raise a family. Those are also ways in which people can find meaning. There's nothing bad about it. But it is not going to satisfy our heart completely. So there is definitely a hunger for meaning in people's lives nowadays. And if we can present Krishna consciousness not just as another exotic Eastern religion uh, or alternative lifestyle, but as actually as a pathway to deep meaning, then we can appeal to a much broader audience. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
So
you.
any other question or comment? We'll stop here otherwise.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Nitya Gopal Prabhu.
No, none of
Yes,
us, Prabhu. You go ahead, Prabhu. If you have a question, you go ahead.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the very elaborate class. You mentioned about the universal message among different traditions, and of course, what are the distinctive features and common features.
Yeah.
We can see the non-Vedic tradition are very exclusive, like you believe in Jesus or Allah or you go to hell, while Vedic tradition are very inclusive and you can have different options, different views, and it's tolerated. So what do you think are the pros and cons? Because this is really amazing. I
See,
mean,
actually, in one sense, that's an oversimplification that Abrahamic religions are exclusive and the Vedic tradition is inclusive. The Abrahamic traditions are theologically exclusive. That means this is the only God. You worship any other God, you're going to go to hell. The Vedic tradition has over centuries become very ritualistically exclusive. Ritualistically exclusive means, okay, these are the Brahmanas, they are pure. You should not even touch the Brahmanas. Some people are, you touch them also, you will become impure. So with respect to rituals, there's a lot of exclusiveness. Now, we could say whether that comes from the original Vedic tradition or that has come because of the caste system, whatever. But every religion has its, nothing in this world is completely perfect. In fact, lots of conversions to Islam, to Buddhism, to Christianity, they happened because of the ritual exclusivity of the Vedic tradition. Like I was in Jagannath, I was in near Jagannath in Rourkela. I was giving a university talk, and there some students were telling that when we go to a temple, if we go to Jagannath Puri, the pandas are hounding us for money and they are taking money from us. And if you go to a temple, people from this group are not allowed in the temple. People from that group are not allowed to enter the temple. If you go to a church, everybody welcomes us over there. So now we have to. There is sometimes a religious arrogance that comes that our tradition is better than other traditions. So yes, every practitioner of every path should have that conviction that what I am doing is the best. But that should not lead to blind spots. And that blind spots can lead to a lot of problem. So I think we tend to be ritually very rigid, and there's nothing wrong in that. For example, deity worship requires a certain standard of purity. The Lord is all pure, which is fair enough. But then we maintaining a particular standard of purity is very different from looking down at others who do not have that standard of purity and making them feel impure and dirty and unworthy. Prabhupada never did that. So the exclusivity in the Abrahamic religions is their weakness because it leads to narrow-mindedness. It can also be a strength because overall it's very simple. Okay, this is God, you follow this God and you belong to this religion. The inclusivity of the Vedic tradition makes us broad-minded, but that broad-mindedness can also be confusing because there are so many devatas and which devata is supreme. There are so many margas, and which marga is supreme? So the level of internal confusion and internal debates that are there in the Vedic tradition between Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta, between Shaivism and Vaishnavism, between the Karma Kandis and the Jnana Kandis. Now that has been huge, and a lot of energy has gone in that. Now Christianity also had its debates between Protestants and Catholics and between branches of Protestantism. But overall, the amount of intellectual energy that we lost in these internal debates, it's like, say, Muslim invaders were destroying our temples, and our scholars were debating about, is Brahman personal or impersonal? And there was no proper coalition of Brahmanas and Kshatriyas that was formed. The Kshatriyas were trying to do their defending, but the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas joining hands together for the protection of Dharma, that didn't really happen much. So I think we need a certain level of humility to recognize the challenges that we face, not because of externals, but because of internals, and that we learn to deal with those challenges effectively. And I'd say, if beyond that, if you have to look at the positives of our tradition, I would think there are 5 main positives. One is the very vivid understanding of, not just understanding, vivid depiction of God. Krishna is a very loving and lovable personality. Second is the much more reasonable and balanced understanding of the problem of evil, that the soul reincarnates over multiple lifetimes, and that's why sometimes good things happen to bad people. The third is the the clear description of sadhana as a means to spiritual realization and not just shraddha. In Christianity, the idea is, oh, you have faith in Jesus and you'll be saved. Now, yes, we should have faith, but beyond faith, it's not the shraddha. Shraddha should lead to sadhana. That is the third key difference, which I'm talking about differences which are actually empowering, which are positive and empowering. The fourth difference is the analysis of this is more philosophical point, but the relationship between the soul and the body through the means of the subtle body. It's a very sophisticated model of understanding how the soul and body interact, because Christianity did not have this concept of the subtle body at all. So the concept of the soul has been more or less rejected from Western philosophical debates. The idea of God is still there, and some Christians, analytical philosophers especially, they are bringing the idea of God more and more into mainstream thought. But as one prominent atheist said, that there is no idea in the history of philosophy that is as dead today as the idea of the soul. So that's because the Vedic traditions, because one main reason is that how does the soul interact with the body? Everything that happens in the body can be explained biologically, so there's no need for the soul. That is the idea. But the mechanism by the soul links with the body, that is a distinctive how the soul has the property of consciousness and how consciousness manifests through the brain. I think that's the single biggest potential for science and spirituality interaction. That can the consciousness be explained only in terms of brain, or do we need something beyond the brain? And some devotee scientists are tapping that opportunity quite a bit in recent times. And the fifth is that there is a lot of flexibility with respect to the forms of sadhana or the levels of sadhana. That if you cannot do this, do this. You cannot do this, do this, do this. So Krishna offers multiple levels. Like Mama Vartamanu Vartante Manushya Partha Sarvasha. Krishna says, all people are on my path. What that means is, Krishna is saying, if you cannot be at this level, be at this level, be at this level, be at this level. It doesn't have to be 1-0. my way or the highway. So the way I put it is that from your place at your pace, access Krishna's grace. So we do have a lot that is very distinctive about our tradition. And
say that again. All
from your place at your pace, access Krishna's grace.
amazing.
So
Thank you.
all people are on my path. So I think those 5 things: the conception of God, the understanding of the soul, the understanding of how the soul interacts with the body, the mechanism of that. So the concept of God, the concept of the soul having previous lives, concept of how the soul interacts with the body. Like that, there are key principles which are quite distinctive, and if you present them, there's a lot that we can offer in the raising of consciousness in the world. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much. The Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Hey, Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanandi.
Is
Hari
there
Hari
Chaitanya Charan
Bol.
Prabhu ki
जय
jai.
चैतन्य प्रभु की
जय।
जय
Vancha
कृष्ण कृपा
Vasi Taram.
जनार्दन पावन देवो नमो
वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः अनंत कोटि
महाप्रति वैष्णव वृंद की
जय।
जय गो प्रेमानंद